Do you support Ukraine or Russia? Although China's foreign ministry has a standard answer, more and more Chinese are beginning to doubt its validity. Some are now boldly voicing their opinions. This is a BMW owner whose parked car was hit by a courier. In China, the income of couriers is relatively low. My car was parked in the parking lot, and the disaster came from nowhere. A courier boy hit it. Let me show you a picture of what happened. In the course of reporting to the police, while waiting for the traffic police, I asked him, "Do you know the Russia-Ukraine conflict?" He said yes. I asked him, "Do you support Russia or Ukraine?" The courier boy was very sincere. He replied, "I support Ukraine." I told him right away, "Man, in that case, you can leave now." I then called to cancel the police report. If it were a Russian supporter, I would make him pay a lot of money. This headlight costs at least 23,000 yuan, or 3,340 US dollars. The front one costs 1,880 US dollars. If you go to a 4S store, it's 100% that you'll be asked to get a new one. Support Ukraine. Good things happen to good people. In order to show that he was telling the truth, the owner showed the scene where he inquired about the repair cost at a 4S store. 4S stores refer to auto centers that provide sales, spare parts, services, and surveys. How much does it cost to replace this new light? More than 20,000 yuan. How much does it cost to replace them in total? More than 30,000 yuan. My first video was made last Saturday, right after the collision of my car. Today is Monday. I came to the 4S store to repair my car. I'm not lying, right? It cost me more than 30,000 yuan. That is, more than 4,400 US dollars. I mean, if you support the Russians, I'll make you pay for it, and you won't pay a penny less than $4,400. I want to make you pay for supporting evil. But because you support Ukraine, I'll let you off the hook, and you won't have to pay. I will take care of it myself. I will solve it myself. Justice is bound to win. Cheers. On the Chinese website Zhihu, the equivalent of Quora, a social question and answer website, there's a question: do you support Russia or Ukraine? The overwhelming response was, I support the side that is in the interest of China. This is a very clever answer, which means that I am in line with the position of the Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson, because Chinese officials keep emphasizing in the media that the party's decisions are made in the interest of the country. This also means that many Chinese people don't actually know what's in the best interest of China. These people are unaware that the recent high-profile choice by the Chinese Communist Party, or CCP, to side with Russia in the Russian-Ukraine conflict is actually hurting the country's interests. CCP leader Xi Jinping arrived in Moscow on March 20th for a 3-day visit. Although the CCP government announced that this was a peace trip, the world saw that the war in Ukraine wasn't Xi's main focus. In the nearly 10,000-word joint statement issued by the CCP, Ukraine appeared in only one paragraph. In the text referring to the peaceful solution to the war in Ukraine, the US and NATO were more often blamed for forming a confrontational camp and pouring fuel on the fire. Who has more to gain between Russia and China? A number of international media outlets have said that it is time for the CCP to be the boss. American media, Foreign Policy for example, has discussed, can Russia get used to being China's little brother? It's argued that the power dynamics between the two parties are now reversed. Today, China is the big brother, and Russia is increasingly, if not exclusively, playing the role of beggar. But is Russia really China's little brother? Between the CCP and Russia, who is really the big brother? Russia, trapped in a war in Ukraine, seems to need more help from the CCP. The Kremlin announced Xi Jinping's visit a month in advance. The CCP used to call the former Soviet Union Big Brother. It recognized the independence of Outer Mongolia, supported by the former Soviet Union, acquiesced to the occupation of Vladivostok and other large territories, and fought a proxy war for the former Soviet Union on the Korean Peninsula before being subjected to nuclear blackmail by it. Now it looks like the CCP is finally getting a chance to be Big Brother. However, Russian President Putin isn't willing to give the CCP a chance to do so. On March 20th, Xi and Putin addressed each other as close old friends before their one-on-one meeting. However, when Xi arrived at the Kremlin on March 21st, Putin didn't greet him at the gate. The two men shook hands and took a group photo at a distance of about 20 to 30 meters from Putin, but perhaps 50 to 60 meters from Xi Jinping. Putin deliberately slowed down and waited for Xi Jinping to walk across the long hall. Xi had to walk past rows of Chinese and Russian officials and media reporters along the way, looking very much like a foreign emissary walking up to the imperial court for an audience. The atmosphere intentionally created by Putin wasn't like a reciprocal meeting of the two heads of state, but a bit like a summon by Putin. Xi Jinping seemed displeased, but couldn't do anything about it. Putin arranged an asymmetrical ceremony, supposedly hoping to elevate his own status while lowering Xi Jinping's. After the two converged, the actual ceremony was over with merely some music and photo-taking. The entire thing couldn't be considered grandiose at all. What should have struck the global media the most was Xi Jinping walking through more than half of the hall to shake hands with Putin. That is to say, Russia and the CCP inevitably must haggle. Xi Jinping may want to be the big brother, but Putin doesn't want to be the little brother. The CCP wishes to have an alliance with Russia with two goals in mind. First, to join forces against the US and eventually help the CCP win in the so-called unprecedented change of the century. Second, to avoid the defeat of Russia and the rapid collapse of Putin, and to prevent the club of the Western world from hitting the CCP directly on its head. On Putin's side, he hopes to get at least four things out of the CCP. 1. Political support in the international arena to avoid being overly isolated. 2. Money to make up for Russia's financial deficit due to declining oil revenues. 3. Support for Putin himself to avoid domestic opposition forces taking advantage of the situation to seize power. And 4. Supplies, including parts for tanks and other weapons. In order to avoid Putin's defeat, we analyze that in addition to public statements and deals, there is likely a secret agreement between Xi and Putin that includes direct military support for Russia in terms of weapons, essential materials, and intelligence exchange. All things considered, Putin is now in a predicament, and Xi Jinping's present with a big gift has given him a breather. The biggest and most direct beneficiary of the alliance between the two sides by far is the Russian regime. According to the list published by the Kremlin, China and Russia have signed a total of 14 agreements, including 2 statements on strategic and economic cooperation, in addition to projects for cooperation in the Russian Far East in the fields of forestry, soybeans, television, and industry. But this alliance is actually fragile and questionable whether it can sustain over the long term. The deepening of economic and trade relations in various fields is the least problematic area of the summit. In their mutual articles published in each other's media, both Xi Jinping and Putin prioritized long-term investment and trade plans. But from an economic perspective, Putin might have overestimated the extent to which the CCP can help. For example, with the financial crisis and looming recession, China may not need as much oil. According to Chinese customs data, China's exports to Russia reached $76.12 billion in 2022. An increase from $67.57 billion in the previous year. The withdrawal of Western brands from Russia is a boon for Chinese auto manufacturing and other industries. China's Geely Automobile Holdings, Chery Automobile, and Great Wall Motors accounted for 17% of the Russian market last year. Although China is Russia's most important economic partner, its volume is far from China's trade with ASEAN, the European Union, and the US, which in 2022 was worth $947 billion, $821 billion, and $734 billion respectively. As an export-dependent country, China earns an annual trade surplus of roughly $400 billion from the US and $280 billion from the EU. China's alliance with Russia will exacerbate the conflict between the US and Europe. Obviously, it'll profoundly impact its trade relations with them. On March 22nd, Xi and Putin issued a lengthy statement after their meeting, jointly condemning the United States and NATO. The statement validated earlier speculation that China and Russia were leaning toward an anti-US alliance and a world order more suited to their more authoritarian regimes. This was the driving force between the meeting between Xi and Putin. It wasn't so much about resolving the conflict in Ukraine. Xi's visit to Russia is a move that directly drives the West to be more united in its resistance to communism. The international community took a number of actions before and after Xi's visit to Russia. On March 17th, the International Criminal Court charged Putin with war crimes and issued a formal arrest warrant. On March 20th, the United States announced a $350 million supply of equipment and ammunition to Ukraine. On the same day, the UK confirmed that it would provide Ukraine with ammunition containing depleted uranium. On the morning of March 21st, the Japanese Prime Minister made a surprise visit to the Ukrainian capital, Kiev, and held talks with the Ukrainian president. This suggests that the US and the rest of the Western world believe that the CCP's peaceful stance is false. Xi's visit to Russia has increased unity among the Western countries. What the CCP leader Xi Jinping has done is an overdraft of strategy. The Communist Party is doing something that is completely out of line with its national strength, which will only harm China's own interests. It's clear that the CCP will be under siege by the West in the future, and the trade between China and Russia will only have a short-term stimulating effect on the CCP. Over the medium and long term, it won't be helpful, but it will rather be harmful. When Xi Jinping left the Kremlin on March 22nd, he told Putin, "This is a time of unprecedented change, and we are working together to promote it." Putin responded, "I agree." This seems to be a kind of declaration to construct a new axis of the alliance for the 21st century. Such a strategic framework is used to deconstruct and challenge the international order led by the United States and to aggravate and elevate the confrontation with the United States. Imagine the consequences for China. The CCP could face isolation from the international community. If Russia is defeated in the Russia-Ukrainian war, the CCP will become a public enemy of the international community and be in a state of total isolation. What Xi Jinping is doing is essentially a big gamble on China's future. White House National Security Council spokesman John Kirby said China and Russia would like nothing better than to see the rest of the world play by their rules, rather than the UN Charter and other rules that everyone else is following, as claimed in their joint statement.
Now look, these are two nations that see common cause in pushing back on American leadership around the world and leadership of the West, leadership of NATO. And so they are sort of using one another to chafe and to bristle at American leadership around the world. But it remains to be seen, how much of a true alliance we have here. These are two nations that want to challenge the international rules-based order. In one case, China, they actually have the resources and capabilities to mount an effective challenge. President Putin sees that, he knows that, and that's, we believe, why he's cozying up a little bit more to President Xi.
On March 24th, U.S. President Joe Biden made his first visit to Canada and met with Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. The two leaders pledged to strengthen cooperation and join forces to counter Chinese communist ambitions. In response to the recently ended meeting between Xi and Putin, Biden said he would not take China and Russia lightly, but that the U.S. has expanded its own alliance.
We have, significantly expanded our alliances. I haven't seen that happen with China and or Russia or anybody else in the world. We're in a situation in the United States where NATO is stronger. We're all together. The G7, the Quad, the ASEAN, Japan and Korea. I have, my staff pointed out to me, I have now met with 80% of the world leaders just since I've been president. We're the ones expanding the alliances.
Biden said he has been hearing for the past 3 months that China will provide weapons to Russia.
Look, I don't take China lightly. I don't take Russia lightly. But I think we vastly exaggerate. I've been hearing now for the past 3 months about China is going to provide significant weapons to Russia, and they're going to. Well, I've been talking about that. They haven't yet. Doesn't mean they won't, but they haven't yet.
If anything has changed, Biden said, it is that the West is much more united. He cited the Quad, the US, Japan, South Korea alliance, and the US, UK, Australia AUKUS alliance. But Biden also acknowledged that the problems posed by closer Sino-Russian ties could get worse. Trudeau said at the press conference that interference from authoritarian governments in China, Russia, Iran, and other countries is a very real challenge to our democracy, and it's absolutely unacceptable.
With growing competition, including from an increasingly assertive China, there's no doubt why it matters that we turn to each other now to build up a North American market on everything from semiconductors to solar panel batteries.
In a joint statement following the U.S.-Canada leaders' meeting, Canada and the United States acknowledged the serious and long-standing challenges to the international order posed by the People's Republic of China, including economic coercion, non-market policies and practices, and destructive actions such as human rights violations. Canada and the United States will also continue to work together to combat foreign interference in our society in a manner that reflects our shared democratic values.
China
resolutely opposes the unprovoked attacks and smears from the United States and Canada. China follows the path of peaceful development, advocates openness and inclusiveness, and engages in win-win cooperation. China has been a defender of world peace, a contributor to global development, and an upholder of the international order. In contrast, the United States and Canada adhere to the Cold War mentality, promote group politics, and instigate bloc confrontations. I think the international community can tell the right from the wrong. The United States and Canada need to reflect on their own behaviors rather than confuse right and wrong and blame the innocent party.
Despite the fact that the CCP's propaganda machine has been working at full steam, praising the party Secretary General's visit to Russia as a great success, but more and more Chinese people have come to their senses. They have observed that history to date has shown who is China's friend in the international arena and who is harming the interests of the Chinese nation. The Russian-Chinese border has been in constant strife for almost 100 years. In the 60s, war even broke out over it. The most recent major event was the signing of the protocol by former party leader Jiang Zemin and visiting Russian President Boris Yeltsin in Beijing during the 2 days of December 9th and 10th, 1999. It involves the CCP government's relinquishment of at least 1.5 million square kilometers of territory along the Russian-Chinese border that belonged to China, including the Kuril Islands, Vladivostok, etc. All those territories were forcibly occupied by the historically unequal treaties signed by Tsarist Russia with the Qing government. Successive Chinese governments since the Republic of China haven't recognized those unequal treaties. For this treaty, there was only a brief 100-word mention on the first page of People's Daily on December 11, 1999. This precious territory of more than 1 million square kilometers, rich in resources, is equivalent to the combined area of 3 northeastern provinces of China or several dozen Taiwan. Jiang Zemin also allocated the outlet of the Tumen River to Russia, blocking northeast China's access to the Sea of Japan. Thus, while Xi Jinping was still in Moscow, an article titled 300 Years of Sino-Russian Engagement, 5 Alliances, 5 Screw-Ups, was spread rapidly on Chinese social media, but it was quickly banned. The article recalled all 5 alliances in history between China and Russia, and all were broken by Soviet Russia. The article concluded with a question: in 300 years of Sino-Russian relations, 5 times of alliance and 5 times of being screwed. Having learned the painful lessons 5 times, China decided to follow the foreign policy of independence and non-alignment. At this stage, some say that China and Russia must make a 6th alliance. What do you think? Moreover, during Xi Jinping's visit to Russia, quite a few videos were disclosed that KFC was delivered to the hotel where the Chinese delegation was staying. The video quickly went viral on overseas social media, with Chinese netizens sarcastically writing, "Flying to Moscow in a US-made plane to eat American fast food and discuss how to oppose the US." And others asking, is the CCP afraid of being poisoned by the Russians? Against this backdrop, it is easy to understand that even in mainland China, where information is severely blocked, more and more Chinese people have started to think for themselves and make their own choices. I'm going to take the subway, I'm going to walk around, and I'm going to wear this. I'll see what they'll do to me. I really don't believe that a group of evil people can scare us. How can we civilized people bow down to evil? Look at the look in this veteran's eyes, the contempt for tyranny and barbarism.
对暴力跟野蛮的蔑视